Hi, everybody. I'm KHOU 11 meteorologist Pat Cavlin. Just want to talk about what's happening in the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico and why it's not something that we should be overly concerned about here in southeast Texas. Hurricane Rafael reached major Category 3 status today as it moved onshore to Cuba. And here's a look at the forecast over the next few days. Notice it comes into the Gulf of Mexico as either a Cat 2 or Cat 3 hurricane later tonight into tomorrow morning and actually hangs on to that status for at least a day or two. But watch, as we get into the western Gulf of Mexico, the forecast cone goes from being narrow to very wide. And what that kind of communicates to you is low forecast confidence in where this thing goes. But also notice how much it weakens. We go from being a Cat 2 hurricane down to a 40-mile-per-hour tropical storm Monday afternoon. Another thing that I want to bring your attention to is the fact that the forecast cone doesn't touch any part of the United States as we get into the weekend and the start of next week. In fact, what I would gather from this is that the storm may start to fall apart before it even gets out of this forecast cone for early next week. Now, it is so unusual to get a hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico during the month of November. In fact, how unusual is it? Well, going all the way back to 1851, there have only been 7 hurricanes on record in the Gulf, 5 of which have actually made landfall in the United States. But notice we've never had a landfalling hurricane in the state of Texas during the month of November. All of those storms have either been in the central or the eastern Gulf. And there's a reason for that. As we look back historically, climatologically speaking, our typical area for development in the tropics originates somewhere here in the Caribbean, getting into the Bahamas area and the southwestern Atlantic, and it takes these storms all the way out to sea in the Atlantic. So even if systems do typically develop in November, they don't usually have a lot of land interaction. And the reason for that is because during the month of November, we typically get more cold fronts digging south into the southeastern United States, into the southern United States, which includes obviously us here in Texas. And these fronts do 2 things. 1, they help to weaken systems, but 2, they're a big steering mechanism in sweeping these storms out to sea. And that is exactly what we are seeing with this system. So here's future track with the storm. Notice how it starts to take that westward movement getting into tomorrow. From there, it'll keep drifting into the western Gulf. And now here comes our next system. This cold front will come in by Saturday, and that is going to help to deflect this storm away from the northern Gulf Coast. And some models actually take this down through the Bay of Campeche towards Mexico, again, even if it holds together. But there's a lot of weakening that'll be happening with this system. And the reason for that is because these cold fronts are tied to the jet stream. So all of this blue on the map and all of these wind particles, that indicates a lot of wind shear in the atmosphere. And that is going to be tied to that cold front digging south across the state as we go through the weekend and into next week. And all of that wind energy is going to help to shred this thing, take a lot of energy away from it. And so this storm is expected to weaken as we get into the start of next week and is really as early as the weekend. Now, just a reminder, we are still in hurricane season. That runs from June 1st to November 30th. So this shouldn't really come as a shock to anybody, even though it is unusual. Our season does peak in September, so we are way beyond that. But we could still get storms. Occasionally we get a handful of storms during the month of November and sometimes even into December as well. But again, the likelihood of these storms having any impacts on land, especially for us here in the United States, really starts to drop off once we get into the end of October and the start of November again, as cold fronts become more frequent across North America. So that's the latest on the tropics. Again, we're not expecting many impacts, if any at all, from Rafael. But of course, as long as there's something in the Gulf, it is something that we will have to keep our eye on over the next few days.